do, and then I'll okay. The Zoom lady has spoken, so we are live. Welcome to this edition of the weekly briefing. I'm Joel. I'm joined by my colleague Tim, as well as Jason here behind the scenes. Say hi, Tim.
Good to meet you.
I don't know if we're going to spotlight. You and I are we normally spotlit? Is that the way this? Oh, I see. Yeah, you and I are normally spotlit. Okay. So this is what, Wednesday, May the 3rd. Greetings from New York. Tim, you're going to say greetings from where?
I'm coming to you live from Oregon in the United States of America right now. It's good to be here and be part of all things going on. I am going to do some traveling, Joel. So the next couple of weeks, we'll see if I can't be live with you. If not, Jason's here in the wings right now, warming up for you. So.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I'd love to have you in New York. You know how I always love it when we're in the same city and we get so much more work done. So.
Yeah. No
Anyways,
doubt.
all that to say, this week, well, let me first say the weekly briefing is a little 30-minute chunk of time that Tim and I carve out every week to share what we're seeing in the industry, bringing owners together and keeping our finger on the pulse, as it were. So this is that 30-minute moment where we like to share, hey, here's a trend we're seeing or a hot button issue that people are talking about or something that we feel like would be valuable for owners everywhere. And many of you are members of our community. If you're not, and you're a studio or a production company owner, we'd certainly invite you to join that community. So Tim, today we have this, you know how it is. We're not talking about sales, so that's why there's not 50 people here, but we are talking about pitching, which is kind of a similar hot button word.
Yeah, people hate pitching. They feel like they're being abused. They feel like it's not fair or they're doing free work. And sometimes like the clients are putting you out there to pitch just to fulfill some obligation they have internally to have a third pitch or some other game plan where they might not be choosing you, but they're pretending like you're part of the running and they're going to throw you in there. So there's a lot of good reasons to hate pitching because it can be very much the powers on the other person kind of a situation instead of feeling like you controlled yourself.
So I love the fact that Ed from Spilt just chimed in because he said, oh man, I am so ready to talk about pitching, having just lost a big paid pitch recently. So I'll be a little bit honest here, hopefully with Ed's permission, that what I know of that story behind the scenes is part of the inspiration behind this pitching course that I've been working on for a long time. And Tim, I'm finally getting it all together and I'm calling it Derail the Pitch. So some of you know that I'm really passionate about this subject, but not passionate so much about the usual rant. I think there's a good rant to be had about pitching. So sure, I'm happy to indulge in that, but we've all been there and done that. I think it's a much more interesting conversation to ask the question, why is pitching awesome? Like, why is pitching like the most powerful thing that we all should master? And how do we play this game in a way where we don't hate it? Maybe we learn to love it. And by the way, I'm going to say, I see Justin Barnes up here on camera, and I'm like giving you a super nugs because he's one of my inspirations. Like, he's somebody that has this crazy appetite for pitching. And Tim, I'll know this. You and I have spotted the number of inquiries coming into studios right now and production companies is on the upswing. We don't have hard data yet, but we're starting to see, right, clients that are like, hey, we're starting to get more calls. Clients are coming back with things that were postponed and are ready to talk again, or they've awarded and so forth. So with that, what now? What are we worried about? What are we excited about?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's when Ed and I did our one-on-one this week, similar conversation, I'm sure, but the conversation was the difficulty in this season of desperation, waiting for projects to be awarded, needing something in-house, and then asked to be doing a pitch. There is a concern that you could be doubling down. Like you're working too hard on something that still has the same likelihood of winning when you're not desperate, but you you honestly feel like I have to win this, and you put too much effort and you end up crashing your company sooner because you've run out of runway because you've overproduced this pitch. So we start thinking about the process of what's a pitch mean? What's the likelihood of you winning? Why do we hate pitches? And then, as you're saying, for this conversation too, how do we pivot into the benefit of the pitch and the need for the pitch? We actually believe there's a good appetite and good reason for a pitch that can get you ahead of the project and with your client. So trying to get it out of that desperate situation, put your thinking cap on, be constructive about a pitch, and then go out and take the same possibility and opportunity to win that pitch as you would in any situation.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I didn't think about that immediately, but I think that's actually a really good point. Is everybody here, be ready, because there's like a lot of us have been in starvation mode for a few months. And so whenever we get presented with an opportunity, there's that tendency to just want to jump on it and take it. Yes. And I would say that is not a ideal posture to enter into a competitive pitch. That's probably a recipe for a month from now looking back and saying, oh, we lost, and why did we do that, and all these regrets and so forth. But there's any number of mindsets, I think, that I would love to kind of unpack. And Tim, you and I came up with 3, what did we call them?
Well, 3 reasons we hate pitching,
regrets.
But actually what we know is 3 pivots to pitching that we really think people want to learn. So,
all right, so we should probably walk through them, right? Because we got 22 minutes, and then it would be fun to drag somebody into this.
Yeah. So let's say the reason number 1 people hate pitching is we think it's unnecessary. So we unpack that. We're saying, wow, why can't the client just pick me? Why? They already know us. They like us. They know we do good work. What am I trying to really prove here? There's nothing to prove. This is unnecessary.
Well, I can think of specifically one owner who was a really good friend of mine that I competed with for many, many years. And he had this like very emotional, like, I don't know, resistance to pitching, because I think he had felt like he had been burned many times. And he would say to me, you know what? These clients, these agencies, they can look at our portfolio and they can just freaking decide if they want to work with us or not. And for a while, I thought he had a good point. And then if you spend some time on the buyer side, I think what I realized was, oh, if you actually talk to people on the buyer side, you realize that that is actually quite naive. You're really showing your lack of understanding and awareness of what it's like to be on the other side of the table and to be trying to engage the right expert and find the right fit. And I'll just put it this way, Tim, what I think is, if clients can't make the leap, they can't connect the dots, they see this beautiful work, this beautiful portfolio, and you think, hire me, pick me. But they're looking at a problem that's not on your website. And they're saying, my career is on the line. This is hundreds of thousands of dollars, my reputation, my career. And you're telling me to just look at all your beautiful work and just assume it's all going to be great. Like, it doesn't really work that way, especially when you are inside of a large organization and you have these multiple levels and also sorts of things. But I don't know. I see you nodding. What are you going to add?
Well, no, I agree. I think if you go to, again, if you backstep to the concern we have in this current environment, that people taking too big of a risk, right? The term there is called the gambler's fallacy. It's this thought process. If you flip a coin 50 times and 50 times, at every time it's been heads, and you flip it the next time, what's the likelihood of it being heads? People have a bias towards like, well, the past determines my future. Therefore, the likelihood of being heads for the 51st time, 100%. You're like, no, it's always 50-50. That fallacy, that bias we have of thinking the past represents the future. If you put that into the idea of a pitch, what we're thinking about is the consideration of chance. If I pitch this project, what's the chance of me winning? And really what you're saying is, it's not about chance. It's about elevating the opportunity for you to engage the problem. what we're looking for is not an idea of like, well, I hope they pick mine out of a gamble as a choice of 9 that they're looking at. It's, wow, how do I advance the cause that the client is presenting me with? And how do I present my solutions for it? Now it's not a chance. It's an understanding. It's a collaboration of where I would solve your problem. Simple. And if my solution doesn't match your needs, or my solution doesn't match your budget, or my solution doesn't match your creative outlook at the time, it's fine. But it wasn't a matter of chance. And if you go into a matter of chance, it is a matter of chance. If you look at it as solving a problem, then it's engagement. I'm looking for future engagement. How engaged am I in this solution? And what's my engagement look like with my solution?
Yeah, I've been working on this lesson where I talk about this transition from know to like to trust, and how clients, especially in high ticket pitching, really only award to someone that they trust. So to your point, Tim, how is the way you're navigating the pitch? It's not just the creative, right, that's in your deck. It's how is the entire process, the entire engagement, the entire conversation leading towards trust and generating trust so that that person feels confidence in awarding you. That's where it's not at all just flip the coin, we won, we lost, right? Because there's a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, we tend to win 1 out of 3 pitches, or we lose, 2 out of 3 or something, as if it's just as if there's some sort of randomness to it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So the second reason we hate pitching is we think it's abusive. And probably the feeling comes from situations when we've been set up. Hey, we have a vendor we want to work with, a design partner we want to work with. This design partner is our choice. We have to fill out the roster from requirements. Ed even brought up an example in the chat that Netflix requires 3 options. So you're our 3rd option. And we feel like I'm just being abused. I'm just being used in this situation. To me, I know it feels that way, but the reality is we're working against something of a qualifier. Is that client qualified for that project? Are you qualified for this project? That's the understanding you have, not I guess I'll fill out your little roster of the 3rd choice.
Yeah, I will just say this. I think how many people here have been through a pitch, and somewhere along the way, it's usually at the end when you're getting the bad news called, sorry, we're going in a different direction, somebody else won, that you suddenly have that sneaking suspicion that we were never really going to win this thing, were we? There was always a favorite. And overcoming incumbency or that favorite is often just too much of a hill to climb. My encouragement would be there's absolutely a method for what I call smoking people out. Like, there are actually ways that you can find out or receive like red flags that tell you we're probably not the favorite, or there's green lights that tell you, hey, I think we are the favorite. I think we're like good. Our chances are good to win this. And I find that information enormously helpful, because if I know going through a pitch that I'm probably going to lose, first of all, I'm not going to feel abused unless I decide to stay in that pitch and overwork, overinvest in that sale, overcommit. But I don't know. If I have that information, I might make different choices called maybe I bow out. Maybe what I present is totally different. I don't know. But I would just say, let's take radical responsibility and not just pretend like we just got suckered into something, because, the classic adage, Tim, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So if you keep going through the pitch process and feeling abused, I got to say, I got to call BS on that on some level, because we can do better.
Oh, you hit something here on the chat too, Justin. Yeah, what we're working against here is, in part of our nature is loss aversion. We hate to lose, and loss feels more than gain. So one loss, it takes 4 or 5 wins to make up for that loss. So we avoid it at all cost. So when we're going into a situation where the possibility of losing, what we have is the bias of an estimator. we're putting too much value on the possible win over the value of possible loss, even though they could be the same. It's our human instinct. Now compound that with a bad economy, and we're really estimating poorly. And this sense of abuse can be compounded, even though you're not being abused, as you just stated, Joel. There's opportunity for you to lean into it. There's qualifiers for you with these clients. They're asking you to do something. And there's definitely opportunity for you to gain and grow in every pitch that you're doing. That's why some agencies, as you already stated, people we work with, pitch all the time. They're okay doing it. They get that it's part of their creative process. Why not be involved and not put too much value in this pitch win process that we want to make it about? It's not.
Yeah, there's one little nuance that I picked up in something that Amanda just chimed in there with, and thank you for that, is we have to be extra careful when we're not communicating and dealing with the decision maker, because now we're getting filtered information. So just know this, right? Like the odds go way down as soon as that thing is there. So that is another red flag. So if you're okay with that, and you know that that increases your chances of losing, then don't feel abused. Because again, no one has a gun to our head. No one is threatening violence if we bow out of this pitch or something like that. But I could go on, Tim. So
the conversation is interesting. The idea of the conversation is just interesting. And I'll take this little tier here because it's really it's great distinction too. Sometimes this abuse is hidden, right? Justin is kind of typing in and saying, being paid is used a bad word. It's not great. But because when the client pays you for the pitch, they own the pitch. And Ed and Justin are basically processing like, yeah, to invest in your own pitch and own the creative on the other side is somewhat better than being paid and having that taken away from you. So in that sense, there's an abuse, even if you're being paid to pitch, because they're taking advantage of you, giving you money, and then owning your creative on the other side of it. So there is something in this process where you have to have your strategic head on and know what your wins and losses are. If there's a $25,000 pitch, it might be worth it. If there's a $2,000 pitch, you might as well just pay for it yourself and own your own creative on the other side.
And by the way, there are some clients that will understand that and respect that. Okay, green light. That's a good client. There are some clients that will say, no, and resist and say, for that pitch fee, right? For some reason, you should be flattered that there is a pitch fee. And that's the one where I'm going to just say, no, I'm not going to play that game. I can't give you, because I've been in that situation, I can't give you $40,000 or $50,000 worth of creative and you pay me $2,000, and then you go take it and who knows what with it, potentially get a 10 or 20 times return on my investment.
That's right. Okay, here's the last one. You rarely win. That's the last reason we hate pitching, is we rarely win. There's a lot packed into this one.
Well, I think to the person who rarely wins, there's a whole reset called, why do we keep falling for this? Now, usually what actually happens is you'll have a smaller or a younger studio where you have a team that was pitching $20,000 and $30,000 and $40,000 jobs, and they could win those. And then they started pitching $50,000 and $100,000 jobs, and they won maybe a few or more than they lost. And then they get into this $150,000, $250,000, and $500,000 level, and they keep losing. And they think, oh, what changed? And what I would say is what's changed is the difference between low ticket pitching and high ticket pitching is very, very different. Because a small job, you're basically pitching creative, and it's like, hey, here's some cool ideas. Do you want to buy them? I don't need you to like me. I don't need you to trust me, because here it is. This is what you're buying. That's pretty simple. But as the stakes get higher and higher and higher, it's painful, because we'd like to think that the creative always wins. It's a huge part of it, of course. But when I remember pitching big network TV rebrands and things like this, you find out the hard way that sometimes you see hey, that creative wasn't as great as ours, but they won because they won the conversation, they won the trust, they won the conversations, the strategy, the whatever, the things that weren't in your deck. But as creatives, we like to go back with our sour grapes and say, oh, if only I put this idea in there, if I'd only rearranged my deck that way, if I would have just had more blank pages in my deck. Like, we think, we want to believe we live in a world where we win because we put the coolest idea out there. And it's just not that simple.
Yeah. So here's the attitude, personality, and desire. What's holding us back? And this is what you call the competitive bias. And the thought process is I have to win. Winning's the only way of capitalizing. Winning is the only possible outcome of this moment. And what we know is if you're living out a strategy, winning helps. Winning is a possibility. But if you're developing relationships, you're developing outcome, you're developing a team, you're developing other roster opportunities, deal flow sometimes has a lot of value, and pitching is only one of the results of deal flow. And your business has these other greater opportunities. If you put too much in the win-loss category and you lose, you might be walking away from a bigger win in the future. A relationship with that creative director, seen as an expert in your field, learning something through the creative process that you and your team went through, owning the creative output of your pitch. There's so many other ways of capturing and understanding win is than just this one simple win-loss kind of scenario bias that we put into our process and our pitches. So those biases compound against us. Those three biases create a lot of compounding effort and negative energy in this process, when pitching actually doesn't have to be hated, does it? If we have the right attitude, looking at the right opportunities, and looking for potential growth, there's always a possibility of pitching and growing and developing and maturing with your team.
It's definitely much more fun when you, I think, start realizing, wow, these clients actually need us more than we need them. Now, I can only say that if I'm really in touch with my confidence. What's the source of my confidence? It probably also helps if I have a nice cash reserve in the bank, right? Because I'm looking at my cash board and I'm seeing, hey, I don't really need this. And it probably also helps if I have a nice, strong sales pipeline full of a handful of deals. I know somebody else is behind this deal, next in line. But I think when the shift goes from, pick me, please pick me, to one of, I'm more like a doctor and you're a patient, and let's have this conversation. And I would love to help you solve this problem, right? Like, if we're a fit, this is going to be amazing. But I need you to follow my lead. I need you to trust me as the expert. You've come to me for a reason. There's the thing that, Tim, that you often say, like, once you're at a certain point in the conversation, you're at that table or you're meeting with that decision maker, like, in a way, you've already won half the battle. You've already, like, the deal is already half yours.
Yeah, it's yours to lose in a way at that situation. It depends the attitude you have walking into it. Are you letting your client determine everything, dictate all of the parameters, solve their problem, and just ask you to do creative execution? Or are you walking into that opportunity with engagement, the thought process of being curious, asking what problems they're trying to solve, see what leverage you have going into it, what expertise you might be adding to the equation instead of just the output, the deliverables, the commodities that come out of your process. Your method, your discovery, your own understanding are all big assets that you bring into that pitch process, and they also grow through the pitch process. You might learn something about one network brand that within, when you're in a different meeting, you say, oh, wait, do you have the same problem that they have? And then you can up your pitch game because you ask different questions. If you're just simply saying, give me your creative brief, I'm going to execute a bunch of boards, please pick me. Yeah, you're really going for the lowest end of the pitch process. And it can be very frustrating because you're in your own way and creating your own friction when the opportunities are yours to grab a hold of and put yourself and leverage yourself into that relationship.
Now, I'm going to just give everyone a moment to like give yourself permission to be upset because in that process you just described, Tim, right? You're putting all this energy and emotion and late nights and bringing your team together and everyone is dreaming about possibilities. And you put all that creative stuff together and then it goes down in flames. It's painful because as creatives, we identify with our creations, right? So when our stuff is out there and someone says no, it is painful. It's very frustrating. But I want to encourage everyone to just, like you said, Tim, don't like dumb it down and think that it's just about, oh, if I put the prettiest picture on the page, they'll pick me, because you will eventually get demoralized as the stakes get higher, the budgets get bigger, and you're losing more. You eventually just start saying, you know what, to hell with this. And I know there's some people here, so if you agree with this statement, whatever, give me a mention in the chat, that a resistance to pitching is ultimately at some point going to hold you back. And instead, if you say, you know what, I'm going to take responsibility, I'm going to master this game and really understand what this process, what it needs to be in order to produce best outcomes. I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, so I'll bullet point a few things that maybe even summarizing what we're saying here are possibilities that every pitch can bring you. And you don't have to focus on the win and loss part of it, right? So the first thing you can do is just reframe the loss. Just recognize what the loss is instead of dwelling on all the negative consequences of that loss. Recognize what you did do and how that does improve your future. Just recognize the opportunity was the game gain no matter what. You can focus on what you can control. It's a learning process, and you're learning what your abilities and your client's abilities are, and then what you can control in these relationships. So you get more fine-tuned and therefore knowing how to win pitches in the future. You can ask for feedback, really great opportunity coming in and out of a pitch. Practice resilience. This is where you know how to bounce back. I think if you're constantly pitching, you're learning how to resilience really well. If you pitch every once in a while, again, you have too strong of a bias going into it, thinking that this one pitch is going to change your entire life. No, people that pitch all the time, no, this is just a mechanism I use. Give me opportunity. I'll think of 3 frames right now, get it out the door. And that machine that you can make from resilience is amazing. But lastly, and probably most importantly to looking into your future, is be ready to set new goals. If pitching and winning is the only goal you have, maybe you're thinking too low. Pitching should be a step in the process of something bigger with a greater outcome. And you're using pitching corporately yourself to get to that goal instead of being used in a pitch by your client.
And hey, why wouldn't we ask for feedback whether we win or we lose, right? We tend to do this whole, hey, why did we lose? Ask the client, why did we win? Right? Like, it cuts both ways. I'm curious, sometimes more curious when I win than when I lose. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, I'm going to say I really enjoy this conversation because I can see people, obviously there's a lot, right, of passion. There's a lot of emotion in this topic. So I'm excited to just keep this conversation going and find the healthy and appropriate way for our industry to respond to invitations to pitch. And I think there's a lot to learn here.
Yeah, I'm going to announce a couple of things before I hang up too. The one is, let's keep the conversation going. Jed wants to have this conversation every day, so I might as well just throw it in community and make that happen, Jed. Also, unrelated is tomorrow in Confab, you're talking to Chris at FX Works, and there's a great opportunity to just learn something new and creative. So if you're in the creative field and you want to see a totally different way of getting things done in the digital space into a very practical space, Chris Webb is a genius at this, being recognized by major brands, doing incredible work with other design companies. So join us in Confab tomorrow.
Yes, I'm just going to plug Chris because he's like, Tim, if I had continued on in my career as a creative, I'd be doing what Chris does, right? It's creating all that incredible stuff in camera that most of us think, oh, I'll just sit down at the computer and make that thing. And I'm telling you, that is small thinking, okay? When you see what these wizards can do in camera, you're going to be like, oh, there's a whole nother arsenal out there at my disposal. And by the way, if I was pitching, I would be creating stuff in camera for my pitch. Okay, for sure.
And then lastly, as we're getting into May, start being on the lookouts for the next quarter's Studio Accelerator classes. Joel's already talking to us today about the pitch, a class that he's putting together. We're definitely going to do the factors method next quarter. But also kind of looking at the field, trying to figure out what areas out there we can help you guys improve and building things up. Revolve has been awesome this quarter. We probably will have to do that once a year, but other great things that are happening. So keep your eyes out for the Studio Accelerators in the next quarter and be ready to sign up and engage us that way. That's all I have homework wise, Joel. This last, I guess I always say, is the best way to deal with the future is to create it. And we exist so you can thrive in your business, your life, and career. Those are my checklist of items I say in every podcast.
That works for me. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for being so engaged in this conversation. And again, I think there's an iron sharpening iron thing here. So let's take this conversation into the community. Somebody start a thread and let's light it up.
Let's make some magic happen. Of course. See you later.
Bye everyone. Cheers.